everyone. Welcome back to the Gnomon live stream. I'm your host, Adam Hartel, and it's my honor to introduce our very special guest to you today. But before I do that, I just wanted to mention that if you are in need of closed captioning for today's stream, if you head over to the Gnomon Facebook page on the Facebook platform, we have closed captioning available while we are streaming live today. So that's available to you. We are also live on Twitch and on YouTube. And I'd also like to thank Lenovo for sponsoring today's event. Thanks to Lenovo's sponsorship, we are able to continue providing great, free, and open content to the public about the wide array of visual effects subjects that we like to address and teach here at Gnomon. So with that, I'd like to introduce our guest, Thomas Montminy Brodeur, who is a VFX supervisor. Hello, Thomas. Welcome. Just a little information about Thomas for you guys. With 15 years of experience, Thomas joined Framestore to develop methodologies and maintain high-end image quality across episodic projects, beginning his career at the company's London office as a paint and roto artist on films like Where the Wild Things Are, Avatar, and Sherlock Holmes, some great films. He chose to move back to Montreal to spread his wings at a different company before rejoining the team earlier this year. Spending the last decade at Rodeo FX in Montreal, he acted as digital compositor, digital compositing supervisor, and most recently VFX supervisor on primetime shows such as Black Sails, Crawl, Watchmen, and Those Who Wish Me Dead. He also worked on Game of Thrones seasons 4 through 7. During which time he acted as compositing supervisor for seasons 6 and 7. And today you're joining us, Thomas, for this event. We're going to be talking about creature creation for television, specifically building Snowfall's Photoreal tiger. So with that, I'm going to pass the mic to you, sir, and hop in the sidecar. I'm really looking forward to hearing from you today.
Great. Thank you so much, Adam. And thank you for Gnomon for the invitation. I'm very excited to be able to show you guys the work that we've been doing on Snowfall to create a photoreal tiger. I will also go a lot deeper about what is the global life of, well, actually the journey of a visual effect supervisor. Absolutely. When I left school, I was exactly in your shoes, and I know that sometimes it's we don't know exactly the path of what's happening in visual effects and how to move up. So I will share with you my experience and how I grew in that industry. And hopefully it will show a different side of the visual effect industry that you know or don't know at the moment, and it will hopefully give you motivation for your career. So we can share my screen whenever it would be ready. Great. So work, life, and a tiger. Journey of a VFX supervisor. So what are we going to talk today? Here a little schedule. So first of all, I'm going to give a little introduction about Framestore VFX company if you don't know it yet. Then I will show a little bit of my path, as I said previously, that hopefully could inspire some of you for the path of your career. And then we will talk about Snowfall. I will talk about the pre-work, so before we actually started the work, how it worked with the bidding and things like that with the client relationship. Then we're going to go into the technical aspect of the project to then go into the creative part of the project, which the creative is mainly how to make sure that we have how to listen to your client and how to make sure that we present the right things to be able to move efficiently with your work. So let's start with an introduction on Framestore. So what is Framestore? For those who doesn't know, it was founded in 1986 in London by William Sargent, Sharon Reed, and Tim Weber. It has right now around 2,500 employees around the world. We have 8 locations in Chicago, London, Los Angeles, Melbourne, Montreal, Mumbai, New York, and Vancouver. And our specialty is pretty much everything. We do film, episodic, advertising, and immersive through all of those locations. We are known, you probably know a few projects of those. Those are some of our most recent projects. The first line is mainly film. The second line is mainly episodic. So as you see, we are really known to be in top of the line of work around the world. And some projects that are coming very soon. We have here Miss Marvel, Doctor Strange, Sandman, and Downton Abbey. Those are obviously the projects that I can talk because we have a lot more, but if I reveal those secrets, I may get into trouble. So now that we went a little bit over Framestore, I'd like to present a little bit myself so you can know a little bit my path. I do not come from a family that was into film. Actually, my parents were university teachers, so it was completely a path that I was not expected to do. But a lot of people kind of decide to go into that industry because they saw Star Wars, they saw big films that then you kind of wonder how you do that. Me, it was a film completely different. It was a Christmas film that made me want to work in visual effects. It was in '92 when I saw the Santa Claus, which at some point there are elves, Santa's elves, that are flying with jetpacks. So I asked for my parents if I could have a jetpack for Christmas, and they never gave it to me, sadly. So through the years when I grew up, I was always wondering how you can think, how you can make somebody think that an elf was actually flying at the point that I really wanted that jetpack. And I was intrigued how you could cheat an image to make it look as real as so somebody would think that it's something that really exists. So as I grew up, I kept that in my mind, and I was always intrigued about multimedia. So I went into Mercy College in Quebec City, where I got a diploma in 2007 in multimedia. Then once I was done with my diploma, I went into Montreal, where there was Grasset College, and there was a class in 2D composition, where I did, it was a professional class, so I did a professional diploma. Then after this diploma, I simply decided to take my backpack and to leave for London, where I told myself, I'm going to try to every companies. I think that all the companies got in maybe 2 months, they got maybe 5 times my resume. I was pretty, I really wanted a job in visual effects. And if after 2 months it was not going to work, I was just going to work in a bar or something like that. But you have Framestore that called me in London and who gave me an interview. It was one of the most stressful moments of my life. Obviously, you arrive. There was a lineup of people for that interview for becoming paint photo. My English was not quite strong back in the day, but I went into that interview with open mind, and they called me the next day and they told me I got the job, where I started my work in paint photo, and I worked on films like Avatar, Sherlock Holmes, Harry Potter, Where the Wild Things Are. So I learned a lot through Framestore in London, and I love the company. 1 year later, my visa was expiring since I was Canadian. So I applied at Photo Effects in Montreal, where I got my job in 2009, where I stayed for over 11 years at Photoreal. When I started at Photoreal, we were only 15, 20 people in the company. So 15, 20 artists in the company. When I left 11 years later, we were 500-600 people working there. So I really saw that company explode and move from one from one area to the other, from one office to the other, and I was a witness of really something becoming big. Also, through my years, I had the chance to teach. So I taught at Grasset College in 2012, 2014 to 2014. 2015, I became a compositor supervisor for Rodeo FX. I continued also to teach at university in Montreal called UCAT in, once again, 2D compositing. And then in 2017, I taught also at O'Sullivan College. And then I wanted to become more than a compositor supervisor. I wanted to become a VFX supervisor. So in this industry, you never stop learning. So I decided to, even though we were working a lot, I decided to start an undergrad studies at the university in Montreal, UCAT, in 3D animation, where I could learn all the departments of 3D, and that would help me a lot to become a VFX supervisor. With all of that motivation, in 2018, I got my shot and I got promoted as visual effects supervisor. And I finished my undergrad studies at UCAT in 2020 in 3D animation. So through all of those years, I could learn 3D directly with the films that we were working on, and at school, which was perfect for me as it was basically my weakness point at the beginning. And now I could understand and I could discuss with a lot of the artists. But the main point is never stop learning. Then in 2021, I moved to London for a family decision, and I re-talked with Framestore, and I decided to join Framestore here in New York. Through that timeline, I was very, I had the chance to also win a few awards. So in 2016, got a VS award for our work on Game of Thrones. In 2017, got nomination for our work on Black Sails, a TV show, and our work on Game of Thrones. So I got 2 nominations that year. 2018, I got another nomination for Game of Thrones. And in 2019, I got a GSCA award for Superpower Dogs. Superpower Dogs was actually a documentary for IMAX about real life dogs hero around the world. And it was the first project that I was visual effects supervisor. So it was well received, and we were lucky to have an award for this one. Main projects that I worked on through my years, you can see here in the last few years, so I'm mainly specialized and oriented to film and TV show, a bit less for advertising and a bit less for immersive. But me, I've always loved the narrative of any show, and this is what makes me love actually visual effects, to create visual effects for a purpose and to bring the story to another point. And definitely, if ever you decide to work for film or TV shows, it's definitely two kind of mentality. As film are usually a lot longer to work on, and it's an hour and a half a film usually. So when you work on a film, the pixel must be perfect, but definitely the quality is amazing. When you work on a TV show, today the quality must be really, really good, but it's a lot faster in the fact that you need to get the narrative a lot sooner. So those are kind of, it can be a little bit more stressful in TV show in the fact that the deadlines are usually a lot shorter. But if you handle stress, usually, and if you understand the narrative, usually it goes pretty well. So those are two kind of shows that you could work on, TV shows and film, and it depends what is your preference at that point. Before going, now you've seen a little bit my timeline of my career, but I just want to make sure to never forget your priorities. Visual effects is amazing, is an amazing industry, but definitely you need to look at your priorities. And I just want to mention it as I just want to mention that in 2018 and I got married, and in 2020 I got my daughter, who are my partners in crimes, and that I couldn't not do any of those without their support. So let's keep going. Let's talk about Snowfall. So what was the role of Framestore on the latest season of Snowfall project? So first of all, before answering that, we need to set what is Snowfall if you don't know what is this TV show. So it was set in 1983, and it talks about the first crack epidemic and the impact on Los Angeles City. So already we knew that it needed to be a project that was really well grounded, and that the tiger was not going to be a flying tiger or something that was going to be crazy. We needed the tiger to be as photoreal and moving as naturally as possible. And it was a very serious subject, so we needed to make sure that when the viewer look at the tiger, it doesn't look fake. Our client was FX, who are owned by Disney. We had 4 sequences with a total of 24 shots to do, which is kind of a small show when we talk about 24 shots, but when we talk about a CG tiger, where we need to do modeling, texture, rigging, groom, CFX, animation, and compositing, it's a lot of work, even if it's only 24 shots. And we had to do all of those shots into 3 months, in a 3 months period of work. And here I wrote without overtime needed. I just wanted to put it because we found ways to be as efficient as possible and no artist had to do any overtime into those 3 months. And we did succeed to have something that we were really proud of. Obviously, to be able to do those 3 months, we needed to have a production team that was on board and that was going to be that would bring that efficiency to another level. So I just wanted to name a few people that was inside the production team and that are really big parts of that project. So producer Sophia Lee, CG supervisor Andy Zazera, coordinator Zamantha Regula, and Mia was the VFX supervisor of the project. Just to give you a very quick overview of what was the role of each people, in case that you're not sure and to know when you're going to be inside the industry. So the producer is the direct client contact, manage the client expectation versus the budget, and make sure that we have the right team for what we need to do. And she's always in communication with us to make sure that we have the right people. Then we have our CG supervisor that manage the CG pipeline, make sure that all the technical aspect of CG makes sense, and he's the main point of contact for the CG artist. Here, Andy did an amazing job because especially for Tiger, if you change just one department, it usually touched 3 other departments that we didn't need to modify things. So we always need to be to make sure that every artist knows what has been modified and what we need to change for our next renders. Then we have our coordinator, who is basically the person that makes sure that our show makes sense and that everybody knows what to do. She is the main person that organized the project, that she managed the artist schedule, the priorities, and she managed the client exchange to make sure that if the client asks for something, they have it, or if they send us something, that we are able to see it as soon as possible. So without that team, definitely it could have been a nightmare, that project. Now, what is a VFX supervisors, and what we're going to talk about here. So there's 3 aspects of a VFX supervisor role. We have the pre-production, the production, and the post-production. To give you a little overview, in pre-production, we are the first contact to the clients. So the client doesn't know us, they didn't hire us yet, they just want to talk to us, and we have to listen to their expectation and their ideas and make sure that we understand their vision. So after that, my role would be to take their ideas, to calculate the number of days, which will bring a budget and which would make a schedule for us. And usually all of this is based off scripts or storyboards. Then production, we go on set. That's where we travel. We need to make sure that we have all the technical passes for all the artists working on the show. So AGRI, measurements of anything physical around the lens, etc., etc. We need to be their friends in the fact that we don't want to be always around them, but if they have a question, you need to be there. So you don't want to interrupt them, but you want them to know that if ever they have a question, you are around. And also you need to be the person, you already see the scripts, the storyboard, and usually obviously on set they have amazing ideas that usually are costly. So you need to be the one, you're not the one to say you don't do it or you do it, but you're the person who says, if you do it, I'm going to be happy, like it's amazing work, it's fun and all that, but it's going to cost a lot of money. So then they are at least aware before they shoot it, is it worth to shoot that new idea or it's not. So you just need to be around and you basically advise the client. And then post-production, once the production is done, you go to your company and you need to brief your team on the client vision. I've put the client vision in capital because sadly, some people may bring their vision instead of the client vision, and you always need to remember that the client has a bigger picture. He knows what happened 2 episodes before, 3 episodes after. He knows the whole story. As you just know the sequence. So a lot of time you can have some direction that doesn't make sense to you until you see a film or until you see a TV show that you understand why that happened now when you shot. So it's very important that you understand the client vision when you brief your team. The communication is the most important thing, obviously. The VFX supervisor lead the creative, the artistic direction of the project. He makes sure to have a solid strategy for his team, and he manage the client notes, and he manage also the contact of the client. So when they have notes, you are able to explain. You're supposed to know your project pretty much by heart. From my point of view, when you work on a project, if a project is a success, it's teamwork. Definitely, it's everybody was on board, everybody did their role, and everything went really well. If it's a failure, in my point of view, and it's not everybody that will agree with that, but it's the VFX supervisor role. It's if the VFX supervisor was not able to drive the project correctly, it will become a failure, and then that's where a lot of overtime can start and things like that. The budget can be hit. But there are some situations sometimes that the client might be very difficult, but that's where sometimes a VFX supervisor needs to find ways to deal with harder clients, maybe show more stuff or things like that. Anyway, but once again, this is my point of view. Let's start to show our first sequence of what we worked on out of the 4 that we have, please.
Grew up with you and loved you.
Hoso, Oh, so wait the fuck up. There's a tiger in here, man. What? It's a fucking tiger. Tiger? Why is it moving? We need to get the fuck out of here.
Great, thank you. So now that we've seen the first few shots, I just wanted to go around what kind of pre-production, what is pre-production, what we receive, and before bidding and working on project, obviously client usually wants to have an estimate of the price and what will be the schedule. So I just wanted to go really quickly around what kind of material we get at first and what is the role of your VFX supervisor at this point. So we get storyboards that looks a little bit like this, and this is exactly the storyboards of what we just saw. So the person waking up, a tiger around, and then we see a close-up of the tiger at the end. So from that description, and we talk to the client, and we can understand what are the emotions that we want to get out of those shots, and then we need to bid. So I'll go really quickly, but just so you know, for every project, then when you start the bidding, you have to start with the assets, let's say, and our document looks a little bit like this. So obviously, we need to put all the assets that we think are going to be necessary for the project. Here, let's say on Snowfall, obviously we will mention that we need a tiger asset. But then you need to think about even more than that. Let's say, do we think that there's cage interaction? Are we going to need to do the bars in 3D? There was dry grass on the ground. Do we need to create dry grass, and do we need to do effect simulation? At some point on the project, leg is being ripped off, but now if a leg is being attacked by the tiger, do we need effect simulation? Do we need effects simulation for the pants? Do we need blood? Do we need to see a bone? So those are all questions that you have and that you need to add into your assets. And then you need to go departments by department and say how many days, you guess how many days it will take for every department. That number of days will then be a crucial information for your producer, who will bring that into a budget, and then the client will know exactly how much it would cost to create what they are asking for. Then we have to do exactly the same thing for shots. So it looks a little bit like that. And when you create, so let's say now we had 24 shots, it would be 24 space that we would use, but sometimes projects are 500, 600 shots. It might be very long to do, but you need to be as precise as possible, because this is going to become your protection. If you become a supervisor, those are things that you really need to think of, and you need to be precise with your methodology. And if you're really precise with your methodology, it might avoid for weeks of work and of negotiation with your client. For example, let's say that at some point they want debris falling from top of the cage on Snowfall, then you may decide to go with 2D elements of debris to avoid to bring the cost higher for no reason, because obviously effects is more expensive. But if you don't say your methodology, and if you don't mention it, maybe at some point they're going to ask the debris to interact with the tiger, which then it would be very hard to have 2D methodology. So then you would need to go in effects that interacts with the tiger, which is a lot more expensive. So you just need to make sure that you protect yourself when you create those documents. If you want to become a supervisor at some point, CG supervisor, com supervisor, or or VFX Supervisor, the best advice I can give you right now is to really try to calculate the real time that you need for a task, and be curious about the time needed for every department. And now when I say that, it's not the little, oh, can you do that? Oh yeah, it will take 2 hours, which usually takes always 2 days. It's really to be real with the timing and to keep that in mind, because at some point it's going to become an average, and a bid is what can bring a show to a success, because if you have the right amount of time, that's where you're going to be able to do the right thing. But at the same time, if you bid too high, that's where you could lose clients. So it's generally that game that you need to understand when you become a supervisor. Now let's talk productions. So that was the brief overview on bidding. Production is where we go on set. So that's where we are usually looked as aliens when we go on set. We have our shading balls, color chart, fur ball, even for in that situation for a tiger. And those are crucial information for our team to know exactly how the light interact with objects, with the fur, with the chrome ball, so then we can recreate the same feeling when we are in shot. This is where also we create HDR, HDRI to have the best information about the light of where the tiger in that situation will be. And we also get all the references possible, the measurements of, now it was a cage, so we needed to be as precise as possible to know exactly the real cage, what is the measurement, how big is the tiger inside the cage, so every shot feel the same. Let's take a look at the second sequence before talking about the asset. Great, so let's talk about the tiger asset. So that was the main asset of the sequences that we needed to work on. And before anything that, any modeling or anything that we start, the most important is to get references. So here we really needed to become tiger expert. We even had to choose what kind of tiger we wanted, what kind of body shape we wanted, what kind of face. So I didn't even know that there was that many tigers at first. But once you really go into the subject, you realize all the differences. Here, for that tiger, we decided to go with the Malaysian tiger, which we found that the curves were a lot more interesting in the face too. And then to make it a little bit more threatening, we just brought a little bit bigger than what is reality. Well, what is the average of a Malaysian, which was still, it's like if it was a big Malaysian tiger, basically. So once we decide the brand, the kind of tiger, then you need its reference over reference. You need to understand how a tiger sleep, how we run, how he walks, the little paws. You need to understand everything about a tiger from there if you want to make your photo real. We went as far as trying to find animation for basically everything that we have. So if you look at here, you can see to the left is a real video. No worry, the guy was not hurt. And to the right, it's almost one-for-one the tackle that we tried to imitate almost perfectly. So for almost every movement, we were trying to find reference of a real tiger here. So now we start modeling. So our modeling was made in ZBrush mainly. The model at the end itself was about 170,000 polygon, but with the displacement, we were probably around 2 to 3 million polygon. Obviously here we only had 3 months, so we didn't have time to do many tries with the modeling. And the philosophy that we decided to adapt here is, instead of trying to make that tiger as perfect as possible, let's try to have something that works well, and then let's actually work on imperfection of the tiger, and that we will see it when we will talk about groom. But yeah, the main idea here was really we do one tiger that looks great, and then we don't touch it, and we go directly in rigging. To make it as efficient as possible, we started with the body, the modeling of the body, to then send. So we didn't do the face; we really just did the body, and then we went directly in rigging. And the main reason is that this way, while modeling then was working on the face to model the face, then rigging was able to start the rig for the body. And once we had a quick rig for the body, then we could send it to animation to do post-viz, which we're going to talk very soon. And then once the face of the model was looking good, then there was the rigging was doing the rigging of the face, and then the modeling was doing some correction on the body, while animators was trying the rigging and could see some problems here and there. So then the modeling had to do some change on the body, and it was always a rotation like this. So one was doing something while the other person, so everything was in parallel, and that saved us months of work. Then so the rule, but the rule number one of that asset is we could change the modeling and we could change a little bit the rigging, as long as it was not going to stop animation, because animation needed as much time as possible to create that type. It's a very complicated creature to animate, obviously, and to make it feel real. So we did need sometimes to say, okay, we're not going to include this in the rig or anything like that, because it would stop animation. So we had to decide choices. But in general, we never really had that problem. Also, we created, obviously, if you look at the lower right image, you can see blend shape. We created about 100 blend shape for that tiger, because the rig obviously had some limitation. So let's say when the tiger was angry, we wanted to have the ears really flat on the neck, so that is an example of blend shape that we created. Then we also modelized, we did the modeling of the muscles, and we had to study the anatomy of a real tiger to know exactly where are the muscles and how they react. So after that, CFX was able to do simulation for those muscles as the tiger was moving with the animation. We also did the CFX. You can see a few. So that was the kind of a first draft of how the tiger was moving, and we showed a little bit the dynamic and the physics behind the fur, so how the fur was going to move, if it was too much, not enough. So after that, we could modify it. The CFX was done in Houdini, and oh yeah, I forgot, the blend shape was done in Mudbox, and the rigging was done in Maya. There we go. Then we're talking about grooming. So the groom was done in Houdini. We really used the groom to try to break as much as possible a CG feeling of the animal. And my first rule here on the grooming was to make it as messy as possible. So if it's really subtle thing, but if you look just on the nose first, there's black spot. If you look at the whiskers, some whiskers goes up, some whiskers go down. We really try to give mess here. If you look in front of the screen left eye on the close-up, there's even an eyebrow going down in front of the eye. We added some roughness in between the eyes. Also, obviously, it's a tiger in the backyard, so we need to build a story out of it. So we brought the neck fur a lot longer, and also at some point the actor says that it's an old tiger, so we we notice that if we have longer fur around the neck, it looks a little bit more like a beard, which was making him look even wiser and a bit older, but still needed to look dangerous. And also we added a texture like dirt texture around the paws. If we look at any references, you could see around the paws where they walk, and around the bottom, they have a lot of dirt, since it's basically where they interact with the environment. So we really needed to think about what is the life of the tiger before that sequence, what happening to him, just to make it really integrated with its environment. And here is the final asset that we had after all of those departments. When we finished the asset, we didn't have any walk cycle yet. So right now you have a walk cycle to the right just to show you what it looks like when he moves. But if you look to the image to the left, you can see that we didn't do just a symmetric pause for the tiger. And this is the approval process that we decided with that client, which that makes it look a lot more photoreal. And that is where it's very important that presentation, you need to work with the presentation. Even if it takes a few more hours, it can save you weeks of work. So this way it looked threatening enough, like he walks, it looks like a picture in 3D, and the client loved it, and we got the approval as we felt that it was a lot more real. So that is a suggestion in case that you present any asset. Try to always find a pause and something just to make it look like the feeling you want into your sequence. Let's show the third sequence before going inside the creative. Great. Now let's jump into shot work now that we talked about the asset. First, for creature work, I always suggest to do a basic pose viz for anything that you do as soon as possible. Clients usually are not necessarily VFX savvy. They don't know much about it. And what they know is that right now they look at a sequence with nothing in front of them. So usually to reassure them, when you just put a creature, your creature, like a quick model, a quick rig, you put it there, and you want mainly then to see the placement of where is that, where is the creature. So this way also once they have the pose viz, they then can really understand how they vision the creature, and they can tell us, oh, we want more agitation here, we want the tiger to move more there or less there, we want the tiger to move. So we get all of those notes really quickly. We got that pose viz. Now, as you see, it's very simple, no emotion in the face, but we got that pose viz in about 2-3 weeks of work. So we really quickly created the rig, the modeling, we've put that in shot. We did maybe 4 hours per shot of quick animation just to tell a story, and then we send that to them, and then that's how we started the conversation. You will notice that once again we talked about presentation. Presentation is extremely important. You will notice that we did do a light setup even on the pose viz, so it is not just a gray shade tiger with no light at all. And you will also notice that in 2 weeks we pushed the roto. So all the bars in front of that creatures are already started. And that is very important, just so the client can see it in a sequence and understand what he's looking at without being distracted by things that are not important. And you can see that from there, we went into final animation. And I mean, obviously in final animation, we modified a little bit the position and things like that, but it is still close enough to what they saw at the beginning. It's just a lot more real, a lot more interest, a lot more emotion on the tiger. And we brought the narrative, the narrative that we wanted to tell. Then let's talk about lighting and comp. So first of all, lighting did an amazing job at first to bring that tiger into the real world. And what we see right now I don't have the image, but it's one for one the references image of how we saw people with the light on the top. We couldn't see much the face. And they did an amazing job just to bring that tiger into the environment. The lighting was made in Houdini, and we rendered it in Arnold. Also, before I talk a bit more about the creative view of this, I just wanted to say that at System, we have at Framestore, we have a fur system for the lighters to be able to work with a lower number of hair of fur, but it multiplies the hair thickness by a percentage. So it gives a really good idea of the look while you work, and it's a lot more efficient for lighters to be able to move the lighting and to have a good sense of what the tiger will look like. And then when they render it on the farm, the process make it that it brings back all of the fur on the tiger. So then it looks 100% with the real fur. So that was one of the tools that we used to be as efficient as possible and to go as fast as possible with the lighting. So this way, if we had notes, it was extremely efficient, and we could do modification really quickly and re-render, put everything back on the farm really quickly. Here also, I want to mention about the relation between lighting and comp, which was actually amazing, because I'm a big fan of, as you saw with the asset of, it's not like if you finish with a department, you go with another one and it's done. Usually I like to go back in for a little bit. And here we had a real life tiger, which was exactly what we wanted. But then we needed to bring that tiger into a narrative. And that is where it's the most important, and where it's the role of the creative, is that you need to bring the interest and your eye at the right place for the story, not for the real world. Don't forget that at the end of the day, you are creating a film and you are not creating the real life. So here, if we look quickly, me personally, I could not see the face of the tiger. My eye was going either on the back of the tiger or on the belly of the tiger. So then we did just a really quick look dev with the tiger, which is very subtle. But if we go back and forth, you can see that really we darkened a little bit the back, the belly. We brought a little bit of pink into the eye. It's subtle, but we brought the teeth and the tongue a lot more apparent. And we boosted a little bit the brightness of the fur around the head, just to bring our attention into that tiger and into the emotion of the tiger, which now that is what we hit for the narrative. We need to hit that for the narrative to tell the story. So then we had all of those modifications that we created in comp with a look dev, and then we send that back to the lighting, and from there the lighting was able to adjust the general lighting for all of the setup, to be able to have that ping in the eyes, to be able to control everything that we needed for every shot. And from there, after that, it was kind of a automatic formula that we were able to bring that kind of interest to every shot. And obviously there was modification on a shot per shot basis, but on both shots that you can see right now, our eye goes directly to the face and not to the belly, which is exactly what we wanted and where you feel the threat. So that's something that is very important when you work on a creature, on a creature show. Let's take a look at the force sequence, please. Great. Now let's talk a little bit more about the creative behind Snowfall. So as you see on all of those images, we took that rule of always bringing our attention to the face as our first point, and that's exactly where the emotions are, and where we want to tell the story. But we went a little bit further than that. As I said at the beginning, we tried to lower a little bit the number of time for the modeling and everything, to try to mess everything a little bit with the fur. But we went a lot further. For me, when we see a creature, what I want to see first is everything that you can see, but that you can feel. So for me, it's everything about environment interaction. So we want to tell the story as if it's there. And when we looked at reference, we could see that the lighting was always changing on the back of the tiger, maybe branches, maybe things like that. And there was always small details like dry grass on the fur, or it's all the small details that was the most important, that I really wanted to push into that project. Our motto was really, we don't see it, but we feel it. And that was really the idea behind all of this. So that is a perfect example that, okay, it's just the back of a tiger, but we added just dry grass just to break that perfect feeling. It's something that we don't really see. We look at the shot, we don't even really notice it until we really look at it. Something else that was very important for me was the interaction with the grass under the tiger. So we created dry grass scattering in Houdini. Our goal was basically to keep everything from the plate as is, except what the tiger was interacting with. So we found ways to isolate the dry grass we could only render the dry grass that was moving in the shot. And this way we were making sure that the dry grass had exactly the same look than the real grass. And then it was easy to integrate. And from there, we had the interaction of the dry grass moving around the floor. So for the whole show, probably you didn't even notice it, but the dry grass is actually moving under the feet of that tiger. And it's very subtle. We didn't want to steal the show with it, but this is something that we worked on, and that was very important for us. If you look here as an example in the back leg, here we see some dry grass stuck with the back leg as it's moved, and it's just a little plus, basically, that doesn't make it look fake. Also, for the environment interaction, I needed to talk a little bit about this one. That's the perfect example of when we try to have as much plate as possible, and that you don't see but you feel it. So at that point, the leg, if you look at the beginning of the leg, this is actually the plate. This is the real leg of the real actor. There is nothing painted out. We just added the tiger, and as he jumped towards the leg kind of moved back, and we match move one for one the movement of the leg. And with some help of the 2D, we did a takeover from the real leg to the CG leg in about 10 frames. So with some paint technique and things like that. And then once the tiger touched the leg, this is where the leg is 100% CG. So what is great is that we had a perfect reference for what is the real leg at first, and what kind of movement we wanted, and the real pants. And then so everything was real, and once the tiger touched it, this is where we can have some fun and start to tear the pants and to add some blood. We also, on this kind of shot is a perfect example that when I told you a little bit earlier that you need to make a story out of your tiger, here at first, if you just think of the shot, we could have thought, okay, the tiger just going to jump on the leg. But here we really needed to have the tiger first looking at the actors, because at first he wants to jump on the actors. Then as a surprise, the leg fall. Then he needs to have the reaction and look at the leg. Then he jumped to get the leg. Now for the leg, we need to also make a story. So as the leg falls into the cage, obviously imagine yourself, you fall into the cage, you start to panic, you know that there's a tiger under. So you panic, then you try to lift your leg out of the cage. And this is why you see the leg going up around the end. And then the tiger is going to attack it and bring back the leg down and smack it down into the cage. Then once it blocks because of the cage, we need that tiger is very heavy. So we need to think then the tiger is gonna need to slide as his weight is gonna rip apart the leg. And that's where we're gonna see then that is gonna open the pants. And then inside the pant, I know it's very subtle, and if your screen is pretty dark, you might not see it, but we even added the skin with claw marks under the pen. So those are all very subtle things, but that makes sense with the physics. And even more than that, if you look when the tiger jumped, we added some dry grass that follows the pause. So this way, when he jumps, we thought if he's in dry grass, probably with the movement, it would bring the dry grass up. So those are really subtle little elements, but that if you think about it at the beginning, this is pretty quick, and it just brings your shot more realistic. So let's take a look at the breakdown that we created for this show. So to conclude the presentation, now you have an idea of the mindset that we had when we created the TV show, and to be as efficient as possible to create that tiger in Snowfall in 2 or 3 month period. I sure hope that it's going to motivate you to push further into the industry, and as you're going to grow, there's going to be more and more ways and to be as much as efficient as possible to cheat the reality. As you all know, right now it's a great timing to be in the visual effects industry, as the visual effects is blooming. There's work everywhere, there's shows everywhere. So this is really a perfect moment for you guys. Of course, if you are interested by Framestore, we definitely have a lot of projects for the years to come. So obviously, we won't miss any work, and we are going to need a lot more people. So please don't hesitate. We are offering some entry-level positions, so don't hesitate to apply. We would love to hear from you. And basically, yeah, if you're interested, apply, because we are always hiring pretty much all time during the year. So is there any question? Also, I'm going to leave my LinkedIn here, as I know that when you leave the VFX school, it's an industry that is pretty small, but it's very intimidating. So don't hesitate to add me in your network. And I'd love to see any progress of any people going out into this industry. Thank you.
Awesome, Thomas. Thank you. It was really cool to not only see the breakdown of that, but also to hear you sort of pull back the curtain and walk us through some of the process and the decision making. So we had a few questions come up in the chat. And the first was, I'll let you decide kind of how you want to address this, but the first was sort of having to do with props. And I'm only guessing, when you're compositing in like something like this tiger and you're having to make decisions about what is going to be interacted with in the scene and what props are going to be in the scene, how do you decide what you want to be physical on set in camera and what is going to be something digital that you're going to need to work in?
That's actually a really, really good question. I would say that every VFX supervisor is going to have a very different point of view. In my mind, I always prefer everything that is real in camera is always better. And I always feel that VFX is usually better to complement to what was on set. Usually it brings a lot more problems for VFX to make it work. But as an example, if I'm talking just about Game of Thrones, when I was working there, that the fire of the dragon was never CG. It was always filmed. They had real flamethrowers, and we had to comb that into the mouth of dragons. So just having that real fire interaction it was very hard to work with, to be honest, because we needed to deal with all of that. But at the end of the day, that's what makes it look as real as possible. Now, how do I decide if it goes into CG? Usually it's when something has an interaction, that it would be the simplest answer. Well, it always depends. Obviously, let's say that a tiger breaks a cage, as an example. If we're able to break the cage, that's great. But sometimes they're just interaction, like, I don't know, let's say that the tiger needs to get a leg into the mouth or something like that. That leg needs to become CG. And as we saw here, when the tiger jumped into the leg, at first it was real. We kept it as real as it's the plate. And we just switched it for CG once there was an interaction with the tiger.
Okay. And I sort of had a follow-up question of my own, I think, in response to the nature of what you just dealt with. Is you talked about, every VFX supervisor can have their own kind of way of dealing with the problems and solving the problems, and has established that with their team and everything. Do you have any, like for yourself and your methodologies and sensibilities, do you have any best practices that you tend to like, this is my rule of thumb, when I'm working with a complex scene like this? Obviously you already told us that if you can have it in camera, that's your preference. But any best practices that you've sort of discovered along the way?
Well, at that point, it's really teamwork. You need to really talk with your team and to listen to them. I always tell to my team, I'm a little bit of a control freak in the sense that I look to every dailies, everything that is out, and you try to give notes as quick as possible, because this is where you're going to save a lot of times. And if you don't want to do overtime, obviously you need to give notes in the hour and not the next day. So this is where it's a little bit complex, where you need to be really on point to give notes as quick as possible. But and there's that sense. But even if I look at everything, I try not to have too many cooks in the kitchen, in the sense that when you have CG artists working on complex scene, and even if it's really tempting for me to talk with those CG artists, I would prefer my CG supervisor to talk with them. And if I have questions, because I look at every dailies, once again, I talk with my CG supervisor to make sure that if we make a decision, then he can talk with a CG artist, and we have always one line of decision. And never we're going to have artists that are going to be not sure if he needs to talk with me or if he needs to talk with the CG super. It's always going to be the same person, and it's always a stream of communication. And for me, on my side, I need to know exactly, if I have question, if somebody asks me a question, I need to know exactly what they're talking about, because I saw what he delivered or I saw what he did already.
And the next question is, maybe a helpful question for someone who, such as myself, who's not as well versed specifically with VFX and compositing. I work in other areas, but the sort of the obvious question from someone that doesn't understand the nature of what might be getting done here is like, why do we make a choice to not film an actual tiger? Why do we make a choice to not wrangle a tiger on the set? I'm sure there's the obvious answer is like, well, you can't film a tiger really mauling somebody's leg. Like that's just not possible. But in terms of other shots and other things like that, could you unpack for us just what VFX has provided to the industry, why this is such an advantage to be able to do these kind of things?
Well, this is actually a really great question, because I do agree that if you have access to a tiger that is already well trained, it could be possible. But I would say that that was also, once again, a situation on Game of Thrones. The wolf, if you didn't know, all the wolves are real. So the deer wolf, the big wolves, they're real. And to have worked on those shots, they all have a chain, and you have to be very limited. Like when you film them, there's just a really small amount of people that can be around, because obviously, as everybody, if you have a really big crowd, you don't know how a tiger can react. And obviously, I don't want to be in the cage if he starts to panic because you have 20 people around. So this is becoming a lot more dangerous. You need to have a limited crew. You don't have all the help. And at the end of the day, if you want to film, especially a TV show, if they have 3 hours to film the shot, and then the tiger decides to nap, you do not want to wake the tiger up. So you cannot just wait around a tiger sleeping or not acting like you want. So at that point, then if you don't have the time, then yes, it's better to do VFX, a VFX plate, and to then film it, and then creating the tiger to have the perfect acting for what you want for your narrative.
I mean, that makes sense. With the time compression that working on a serialized television program, gives you, it would make more sense to direct artists as opposed to being everything hinging on directing one tiger and hoping, that tiger does what you want it to do. Exactly. Let's see. We had another. So we had another question, I mean, I may just not have studied tigers close enough to be familiar with these terms, but it had to do with the tiger's eyes, the tapetum effect in the tiger's eyes, some of these things that we see with cats, when you see the light reflecting out the back. Like, how did you deal with those types of complexities? Because I would guess if you handle that wrong, you might wind up in sort of an uncanny valley kind of a situation.
Well, that's actually a really very good question, because at first we did those effects because we did not, at the end of the show, we did not do that effect of, and especially at the end when the car was coming close of the tiger, we had that light really strobing into the eyes of the tiger, and we created that for the tiger. But at some point it started to look like Star Wars, and it started to look really, really weird. And like there was a few shots that I wanted to keep it here and there, but then it didn't make sense, because if you want to have it for one shot, you need to have it for almost all the shots. So at the end we had to remove it, and then we decided to go with Pings of Light, which was less distracting. But it's a good question, because we did think about it right away. We wanted to do it. We tried it, and sometimes it just doesn't work. So we had to remove that.
And so the final question that we have in the chat has a little bit to do with the sort of decision making and needing to, you have a certain amount of time you're working with, you have a time budget, and you've just got to make a decision in the end. So one of our viewers was curious to know, if you say you had more time on this particular project, there's some examples of things that you would have loved to have been able to do with this.
Actually, no. We finished it a little bit early, but the simple reason is that from the moment that we knew we were going to do a tiger and that there was dry grass, we said from the moment that we got it, even before post-viz, we knew that we wanted to have, I forgot to show it, but we had a light effect. Never the tiger was moving without shadows of the bars on them. from the moment that we started, we knew that there was a cage, we knew that there was dirt, we knew that what we needed to create. So from the first week, we knew that we were going to do the blood this way. We knew that like the leg is moving, so we need a trail that is not too much. And we kind of just pushed it, and we didn't need more time, in the sense that obviously if we had more time, maybe we would have pushed even more the CFX. Maybe we would have explored to have longer fur, groom, or anything. But those are all things that end up working, and that did work for us really well at the end of the day. So honestly, at the end of that project, we were just very happy. And as I said, if we really wanted to change something, we would have done it, because we are not, we don't have the mentality to give like something that we're not happy with. And definitely the client was happy with it. So we were able to think about everything we needed to build 3 months in advance and not 1 week before. And for that project, and I'm not saying that it's going to happen for every project, but that project, it worked extremely well,
Yeah. I think that's, and that should feel very satisfying, because that's a great sort of testimony to the efficiency of your team, right? That you could take that time budget. And of course, I think also the flip side of that is when you have limited time, when you don't have all the time in the world to tinker, it really helps you to resolve what you're doing, to make choices to make it land and resolve. And so obviously you guys are able to do that. It's really cool.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, is that when you're in that situation, you need to have an answer, white or black, and it's not gray.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot be in a gray zone. And when I was talking about the visual effects supervisor role, this is the decision that you make, and you're going to make mistake, and maybe at some point somebody's not going to be happy with you, but you make decision. You need to go in one direction, and when you have a team that is also as efficient as we had on Snowfall, and that we were just a big team, and it was just amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So when we have that kind of team that we're able to push and have ideas together, obviously we're just going to be happy at the end of that project.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I think that's probably also a really great note for someone who would be aspiring to work in visual effects, or to eventually be a VFX supervisor, is you've got to develop those skills to know when to kind of look, we have to commit to something here. So a lot of it's leadership too, just standing by a decision and making it happen, and not second guessing yourself. I think that's really good and really important.
Exactly. And your team's going to respect you a lot if you make a mistake, to say, this is my fault, let's go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Let's go to the left.
Yeah. Well, creatives get so nervous about making errors, but when you realize that's how you learn, that's how you get better, is
Exactly.
to make a decision. And if it's an error, then you're going to make it better next time.
Yeah.
Well, were there any sort of, any final parting words you'd like to say to those who would be watching right now that are sitting here going, man, like maybe for the first time it's dawning on them, or maybe they've thought for a long time, I would love to aspire to work in this world, and to be on a team like that. Any words of wisdom or guidance you'd like to share?
Well, as I said a little bit in my story at the beginning, I really started from nothing. I didn't know anything about visual effects, and it was just a Christmas movie that made me realize that I wanted to do visual effects. So, I mean, right now, I think that you're in a great school, and you just need to push. You need to send a resume. You need to talk with companies, and if they don't contact you, resend your resume a month later. Like, they need to at some point know your name, and you're gonna have your shot at some point.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, Thomas, thank you so much. And thank you for the very well-crafted presentation as well. This has been a real education. So yeah, thanks for sharing your passion with us, and we hope to maybe be able to do something with you again in the future.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome.
Thank you.
Well, guys, thanks for watching. Please do come back. We've got regular live streams happening every week. Some great series revolving around character creation, creature creation, animating shorts in Unreal Engine, you name it, as well as awesome events with industry professionals like Thomas, like we've had today. So we hope to see you here back. But in the meantime, stay safe, stay creative, and we'll see you soon. Thanks. Bye-bye, everybody.